One of the most common questions we hear from homeowners is, I found a crack in my foundation. Should I be worried? And honestly, I understand why people get nervous. Because when you hear the word foundation, you automatically think expensive. You think your house is falling apart. You think somebody's gonna tell you that you need to tear everything out and spend a fortune. But here's the truth. Not all cracks are created equal. Some cracks are perfectly normal. Some are cosmetic, and some are warning signs that something bigger is happening beneath your home. So today, I want to walk you through the difference between vertical cracks and horizontal cracks, what causes them, and more importantly, when it's time to stop watching and start taking action. I'm Justin with Dalinghaus Construction, and let's talk about cracks. First, let's get one thing out of the way. Concrete cracks. That's not a defect, that's reality. Concrete shrinks as it cures. Houses settle, soil moves, temperature changes, water comes and goes. These things happen. So, seeing a crack somewhere in your foundation doesn't automatically mean your house is in danger. The important question isn't simply, is there a crack? The real question is, what kind of crack is it trying to tell me about? Because cracks are like symptoms. They're your home's way of communicating with you. And just like symptoms in the human body, some are minor and some are signs of something more serious. Let's start with vertical cracks. Vertical cracks are probably the most common cracks that we see. They run up and down and are often a result of normal settling. As a house compresses the soil beneath it after construction, little shifts occur. Concrete also shrinks slightly as it cures. Because of that, vertical cracks are fairly common, especially in newer homes. Now, that doesn't mean you should ignore them completely. A vertical crack can still allow moisture into your foundation. And if you start seeing several cracks close together, or they begin widening, that's something we want to take a closer look at. But generally speaking, vertical cracks aren't usually the ones that keep us awake at night. Most of the time, they're repairable and manageable. Horizontal cracks, on the other hand, are a completely different story. When I see a horizontal crack, my ears perk up. Because horizontal cracks are often telling us that something is pushing against the wall itself. Think about the soil surrounding your home. When that soil becomes saturated with water, it gets heavy, really heavy. And that pressure doesn't just push downwards, it pushes sideways. We call that hydrostatic pressure. Over time, all that pressure builds up against your foundation wall, and eventually, something has to give. Sometimes, that something is concrete. And that's when you begin to see those horizontal cracks. Unfortunately, horizontal cracks are usually much more serious because they can indicate structural movement. Left alone, those walls can continue to bow inward and the problem can become significantly more expensive over time. Another factor can be poor drainage. Maybe your gutters are overflowing. Maybe your downspouts dump water right next to your house. Maybe the grading around the home slopes toward the foundation instead of away from it. Water is powerful, and over years and years, it creates enormous pressure beneath and around your home. So, which crack is worse? Generally speaking, horizontal cracks are more concerning than vertical cracks. That's not to say every horizontal crack means disaster, and it's not to say every vertical crack is harmless. But if I had to pick one that deserves immediate attention, it's usually going to be the horizontal crack. Now, another thing we tell homeowners is not to panic over hairline cracks. Tiny hairline cracks are very common and usually not a major concern, but there are certain things that make us pay attention. If the crack is getting wider, if one end is larger than the other, if it's wider than about 1/8 of an inch, if it's horizontal, or if you notice doors sticking, windows not closing properly, or floors becoming uneven. Those are signs that something more than normal settling may be happening. And that's where having a professional inspect the home becomes really valuable. Because every house is different. Sometimes the repair is relatively simple. For a vertical crack, it might just involve epoxy injection or polyurethane sealant to prevent moisture intrusion. Other times, we may need to address drainage issues. Maybe water management is the real culprit. And then there are situations where structural reinforcement becomes necessary. If a wall is under pressure, we might recommend carbon fiber straps, steel beams, or foundation underpinning with helical or push piers. The key is understanding that we're not just fixing cracks, we're solving whatever caused the crack in the first place. Because if you don't address the cause, you'll just keep chasing symptoms. And honestly, one of the biggest things homeowners can do to protect their foundation doesn't involve concrete at all. It's water management. Good drainage is huge. Make sure your gutters are clean, extend your downspouts away from the home, make sure the soil slopes away from the foundation, don't allow water to pool next to the house. These simple things can make a massive difference over time. And probably the best advice I can give you is pay attention. Walk around your home every few months, look for changes, take pictures, notice if cracks are growing or changing, because catching foundation problems early is always easier and less expensive than waiting until they become major structural issues. At Dalinghaus Construction, we inspect homes every day throughout California, Arizona, and Nevada. And one thing we've learned is that homeowners sleep better when they understand what's happening. Sometimes the answer is, don't worry. Sometimes the answer is, let's keep an eye on it. And sometimes the answer is, we should address this before it gets worse. But the key is knowing the difference. So if you've noticed cracks in your home and you're wondering whether they're normal or something more serious, we'd be happy to take a look. I'm Justin with Dalinghaus Construction, and remember, not every crack means disaster, but understanding what your home is telling you can save you a lot of money and a lot of stress down the line. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next home improvement guide.